Hello, and welcome to the Winded Podcast, a podcast full of stories about the times in life that remind us that we're alive. From life's biggest challenges to fun adventures, these stories are here to inspire. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Klein Leonard, and I currently have no identity. None. I used to be a college student. I used to be a photographer. I used to be a digital nomad. I loved all of these titles that I could give myself because it felt comfortable to fit in a box of familiarity. But right now, I am in this middle section of my life where I don't identify with shit. And it's really weird because I feel like sometimes I don't fit in anywhere. And sometimes I feel like I could fit in anywhere. What made me realize this the other day was when someone was asking me, all the normal questions. What do you do? And I didn't have an answer because, I'm doing this podcast, I'm doing some other side gigs, but I don't really have a full-blown business or job formed at this moment. So my answer was just living life. And I don't know, it's just weird to hear that come out of my mouth. And it's weird to notice that I don't have an answer to that. So with this podcast today, I really don't have anything planned. Usually I have a story that I want to tell and a lesson that I want to share from it. But I'm realizing that one thing that's contributed to the point I'm in where I can't identify with much, and ideally I would have like a solid business going right now, but I don't. I just don't. And I think one of the reasons that contributes to that is that I try to think way too far in the future and plan everything out. But I think the truth with my journey as it's been through my entire life is that oftentimes things don't go to plan and things pop up, which lead me on a path I never could have imagined for myself. And this urge to plan everything out is also known as analysis paralysis, decision paralysis, just wanting to get everything right now and then follow through on a plan. I think it's really kept me stuck. And so I wanted to try applying not doing that to this podcast today and just see how it goes. So thank you for coming along the ride with me. So I have no plan, but we're just going to roll with it. Just like life. You know what I'm saying? Just like life. So, well, what's a few things I can think of that I never could have planned but turned out way better than expected? The first thing that comes to mind is I was just thinking about this last night too. When I found this dog that was running around in the middle of the street in Billings, Montana. I have such a heart for dogs. I could not just leave, even though I needed to get back home. It was a 15-hour drive home. And if I left late, the later I leave, the later I get home. And so really, I didn't want to stay there any longer, but I saw this dog out in the middle of the street, and all of a sudden, nothing else mattered but getting this dog. And I remember that there were a bunch of people around, and everyone just looked at the dog and kept going about their day. And I was like, "Are you crazy?" And I went inside the hotel I had just stepped out of, and I told the front desk, "Hey, there's a lost dog outside. Um, if you guys can do anything about that." And they're like, "Oh, okay, thanks for letting us know." Like, clearly didn't care. And so I'm like, "Okay, well, now this dog is my responsibility." So I tried to catch this dog. The only thing I was interested in was my dog, Monet. That's the only time it would get close, is if she was sniffing Monet. She didn't want treats. She didn't answer to me calling her this other dog. Um, so I was starting to get hopeless about catching this dog. So I said, "You know what? If I don't catch her this next time, I have to leave. I have to get home." And I just stood there for a while with Monet on the leash. She came up to Monet and I was kind of scared, but I just took my hand and I grabbed the collar and I grabbed her and I finally got this dog. And I ended up calling the numbers that were on her tag. They didn't answer. So I took her. Thankfully, there was an address on her dog tag that was an 8-minute drive away. I couldn't believe how far it was, how far I thought maybe this dog had ran away from home. And a couple minutes later, the owner ended up calling me back after I'd left a voicemail and came home to get her. He was at the hospital, which was right by the hotel I was staying. And so this dog had jumped out of the car and wandered around the street. But anyway, I get to talking to this man who had lost the dog. He was in his 80s. And again, I like totally forgot about the part of me that wanted to get home. There was something about this interaction that felt really important, that felt like this is more important than getting home right now. And so we continued talking, and, this guy mentioned he was a photographer in the war and how he backpacks and hikes, which I was starting to get into at that time, and yada, yada, yada. Well, he ends up inviting me on this 3-day kayaking trip down the Missouri River in Montana. And fast forward to that moment, it was one of the most incredible experiences of my entire life. And I could never have planned that. What's really funny is that about a month prior, I was watching some YouTube videos of this girl pack rafting down the Missouri River, and I thought that looked amazing, but I knew nothing about pack rafting. I didn't have a flotation device like that, and so I didn't know how it was gonna be possible. So I just kind of forgot about it until this man had mentioned it, and all of that to say how funny it is. It's like even this thing that I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure how, it all got figured out over time. And my only responsibility in that process was to follow my heart. And I have a big heart for dogs. So by really just putting aside this desire to get home early and get this dog, um, this beautiful opportunity opened up. And by the way, I ended up staying in Billings for probably 4, 5 hours longer than I had previously imagined, because I had to take Monet to a dog park, and then when we did meet up for lunch, We got to talking. So I ended up getting home at 6 in the morning instead of maybe midnight to 2 a.m., something like that. But it didn't matter. I didn't it didn't matter. It truly was more important to stay. Now, if I think about if I would have stuck to the plan, my plan was very strict, and it was to leave the hotel at about 8 a.m. and drive straight home as fast as I could. And sometimes I catch myself sticking really strict to the plan, and I easily could have done that. I think that animals are such a soft spot in my heart that in that scenario I couldn't. But let's just say if it was, I don't know, a possum wandering out in the middle of the street, I wouldn't have gone after it to find its family or whatever, you know? Um, I mean, a cat, I don't know, cats are a little bit tougher, you know? I don't know if I would have stuck around for a cat. They're kind of a little more independent. They can find their way around the streets, you know, they're a little hood. But dogs, they get really confused, especially when they're born in a home. They're not used to the streets. They're not raised in the streets like cats. Cats are a lot more hood. So I don't know if I would have stayed for a cat, but dogs for sure, especially the non-street dogs, the ones that weren't raised in the hood. Um, I just had to help them out. So yeah, but it just gets me thinking of how many times I'm so strict to this idea in my head of how things need to play out that I don't even know how many times I've ignored an opportunity that would have been amazing. You know what I mean? And I feel like in everyday life, they actually pop up in more subtle ways than a dog running out in the middle of the street. Like for me, recently, I have this cute town that's like 15 minutes away from me, and sometimes I'll get coffee there and walk up and down the streets just to get my steps in. But there's stores open, and the other day I was doing that and I kind of felt the urge to go into this one shop, but I ended up not doing it because I don't know, I was scared. I didn't really want to buy anything, like I didn't plan on shopping. I always think it's awkward when you're like the only person in the store and there's someone working there and they're just like, "What's up? It's just you and me in here." So I ended up not going into any of the stores as I walked around. But I mean, I just get to thinking like, maybe there was something there. Maybe I should have walked in there. So that's an example of a time that I didn't do it. And another time of something more subtle that actually happened in this same magical little town with the cute shops is one day I was going through a fall art tour with my friend and we stopped in this vintage shop and there was this really pretty necklace. It wasn't like super fancy, but it was just like very much my style. I felt really drawn to it. It was basically the owner of the store was like, "Oh yeah, this one older lady is getting rid of all her jewelry. She traveled around the world, all of that kind of stuff." And so I love the story. I love the necklace, so I bought the necklace. And then we kept walking, and I felt really drawn to go into this one store. I don't remember the name of the store, but it doesn't exist anymore. But I walk in and I make eye contact with the owner, and the owner ends up coming up to me and saying, "You know what's crazy? I have that exact same necklace, the exact same necklace that I had just bought and put on. She had." And I said, "Well, where did you get it? Maybe it's some popular store, like maybe it's a Walmart necklace. I don't know." Um, but she says, somewhere at like some random art fair in Iowa 30 years ago. And it's just like, okay, come on. What are the chances of that happening? And this woman we ended up getting coffee together like a couple weeks later. We both wore our necklaces, of course. And she ended up hosting a lot of art events in that town. And so, if you know me, I love art. And it was just really cool to be connected with her. So that's an example of like a more subtle thing. It's just like this pull to go into a store. Something really simple like that is what I see happens more often than not. It's usually those less obvious things that lead to the things in life that maybe we're dreaming of but don't know how to get there. So I'm personally trying to get a little bit better at that, not only noticing when those little subtle moments pop up that feel like maybe there's an opportunity here, and to have the courage to just do it. Be like, what am I going to lose going into a store, right? And truth be told, sometimes nothing happens when I follow those subtle little urges. And sometimes nothing happens until months later. And it's just feels like a coincidence that that thing happened a few months prior. But that leads me to a question of whether you, as a listener, do you follow these little subtleties or maybe not so subtleties like dogs in the street? And do you notice that they sometimes lead you places that you want to go or maybe never imagine that you could go, that wouldn't be possible or maybe would take a lot longer or a lot more effort had you not followed these little subtle pulls? Can you think of a time where it did? Just this crazy coincidence because you listened to where your heart was pulling you. For me, it's usually when I'm doing things I love to. And I have, oh my gosh, another example of this, which just happened a couple days ago. Also in a coffee shop in that town. Wow, I need to go to this town more. I'm realizing my mom and I got some breakfast at this coffee shop in that little town. And I didn't even notice this. My mom noticed it. There was a girl that walked by us and she had a horse on her shirt. And underneath the horse, it said Hoofda, like Oofda, the Norwegian little phrase, but with an H. Well, lo and behold, this past spring, my mom and I went to the Midwest Horse Fair in Wisconsin. And my mom had seen a shirt like that and really wanted to buy one, but she decided not to for some reason. So she says to this woman, "Oh my gosh, I love your shirt. I was just at the Midwest Horse Fair and I wish I would have gotten one." And the woman responded, "Oh, thank you. I just got back from this Fjord event. It's only 10 minutes away from here. It's an annual thing. And it's basically this Fjord breeder who invites people out to the farm where there's just this pasture filled with Fjord mares and their little babies that were just born from a month ago to a couple months ago." She said it was amazing. You get to pet the little babies and interact with them. And the woman who owns us is just phenomenal. And so my mom and I kind of just looked at each other and smiled and we're like, we have to go. So it was about noon at that point. And she said, they close at 4. So this only happens once a year. So we just spontaneously decided to put our boots on, so to speak, go out to the farm and go pet the horses. And it was amazing. Oh my goodness, it was amazing. If you don't know this, I love horses. I grew up around horses. I rode horses from age 10 to, I mean, I still ride horses a couple times a week, but it just always fills my heart to be out there. And we got to meet a couple people, and a fjord artist and the owner of this place who is really thoughtful about the grass that she plants, how she herds the animals. She also had goats and sheep and other animals, as well as these horses. And it was just so fascinating to learn from her. And who knows, honestly, if anything will happen or come about because of this. I did ask if she wanted volunteers, but it doesn't sound like they needed them right now. But the point is that it just brought so much joy to my life. And I always have this craving to be around horses. And so it turned out to be such an amazing and fulfilling day full of adventure and spontaneity. And it just ties into this concept perfectly, that it's good to plan in some ways, right? It's good to have sort of this idea of where we want to end up roughly. I like to call this my North Star. Like, what's my end goal in life? What direction do I want to go in? What values do I have? But then there's also this importance for letting things happen moment to moment. That for me, I feel like I was born really good at this, just living moment to moment. And then just through adulthood, I feel like it slipped away a little bit. But it's so important to just be present and to be open to what could happen. So again, can you name just one time when you just stayed open to the moment, stayed open when you're out in public, where you followed where your heart pulled you, and it led to opportunities or just good memories that you can look back on and smile at? And then think about where you're at in life now. Do you live a life in a way where, yes, you have your plans and yes, you have your North Star, but do you also still stay open to these opportunities to live, these opportunities to have more fun and interest and love come into your life that you never could have made a plan for? And I'll leave you with this little dare today, which is to follow your heart today, even if it's one little thing. Maybe it's a coffee shop. Maybe it's a project that you've set down for a little bit. Maybe it's to get outside or to swim or to play, to do a hobby. Maybe it's to go to that restaurant you really wanted to try or that store. Maybe it's to reach out to someone you haven't talked to in a while, but you've been thinking about. What's a little something you can do to follow your heart today and stay open to where life can lead you? How life can lead you places that you never could have planned for yourself. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed my little spontaneity and unfiltered podcast. I mean, it's funny how, like, I noticed this with my brain where not to brag or anything, but I can start from this like random place out in foo-foo land and end up where we just ended up, and it's kinda like, I don't even know how my brain does it, but when I just start talking, it just leads to cool places like this. So I hope you enjoyed my little rant, my little story time, and I hope you feel inspired to do a little bit of living today. Thank you and have a wonderful, wonderful day.